Welcome to Phil Fails. My name is Philip Jones, and today my guest is Jamie Figari. She is a LCSW and holistic psychotherapist. Wave at everybody. Did you look at the camera when I introduced you?
I did not.
Look at it right there. Look at the people. Wave.
All right.
Yeah, and today Phil fails at narcissism. We're gonna talk about narcissism today.
Yeah, I hear it a lot.
I want to start with the Greek story, which I told myself I was gonna like research it before you got here, but I didn't. I'm gonna do it by memory, and you can help me.
Yeah.
Like the idea is this guy, Narcissus. He went to this lake and saw his reflection in the water of the lake and stood there and just admired it and looked at it forever until he died.
Yes. And then he withered away and turned into a flower, I think is how it ended.
He turned into a flower?
I think so. I think that's how it ended. I actually looked it up again last night.
You did?
Yeah.
And he withered away and turned into a flower?
I think it was, he was so in love with himself that he turned away any bids for attention or love. Yeah. So he just became so in love with himself that he just stared at his reflection until he just withered away.
Narcissus. Dang, guy. And that's the foundation for this personality disorder that we're going to talk about through the lens of relationship, how it shows up in relationship, how it shows up.
Yeah, we can talk about how it shows up in clinical setting, how it shows up in relationships, how it shows up in our modern day culture, you know?
I just want to know how every girl I know found out how to clinically diagnose this thing, because it seems like every woman I know is able to clinically diagnose one of their ex-boyfriends as narcissist. I have been clinically diagnosed by some people that weren't they weren't therapists, but they were very confident.
Of course.
Like, this dude's he's a narcissist.
Yeah.
I'm like, you sure? I just was like wanting to go to band practice, you know?
well, that will kind of lead into that, I think, right? Is because what I would say is that, you know, this person, a narcissist, you're hearing it a lot in our culture. But what we don't talk about is maybe the traits of narcissism and what differentiates narcissistic traits between narcissistic traits and then a full-blown personality disorder, someone that meets clinical criteria for that diagnosis, right? Narcissistic traits are not all bad. We need them actually for self-preservation. We all have an ego, and without having a sense of self, we're not able to have boundaries or protect ourselves. So we have to have some, you know, ability to form a sense of self that is self-focused, I guess. Yeah.
So we all have narcissistic traits.
Yeah, sure.
And some of them are healthy. Some of them are normal and healthy.
Yeah, I would say in a lot of individuals that have have a higher expression of what one might perceive as narcissistic. You know, there can be a lot of charisma, a lot of confidence. It's not all bad, right? There's a difference between that trait becoming something that impacts your life in a way that is pathological, where maybe it looks more like an excessive need for power or control or dominance.
Yeah.
It can even bleed into antisocial behavior patterns and, you know, things like that.
Yeah, so. You said charisma. Now all I'm doing is trying to think of what the kids call that now. Is it Rizzler? Riz? Is that Riz? That's charisma?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're using it right.
Riz.
Yeah.
Just so everybody out there knows what Jamie's talking about, sometimes people with narcissistic personality disorder have mad Riz.
I have the Riz. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Goodness. And what are some of the positive ones? You talked about self-protection or having a positive self-image. There's probably parts of it like, I'm beautiful, I'm smart, I'm strong.
Right.
All those are,
I would say, positive. It could be someone who might have higher traits of narcissism can also be very charismatic and can bring people together,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you see this a lot in positions of where people excel in their job because they're able to bring people together in ways that, yeah, maybe is there some self-indulgence there? I don't know. But if you're able to gravitate, if you're able to bring a big group of people together and they're
Yeah.
able to, you know, unite people in a specific way because you have the ability to capture a room, you know,
Yeah.
with your own charisma, is, I don't know, that's not inherently a bad quality,
I
right?
guess it depends on what you do with that
It
room.
depends on what, I think it's what you do with it.
Because we talked about earlier, before we started, this influence.
Mhm.
Like, we're easily influenced. So once
Sure.
you have someone's attention, how are you influencing them?
Yeah, that's a big one. Well, another thing that I think is important, and we don't hear it discussed in this way, but narcissism exists on a spectrum.
It does?
Yeah. So we hear, I think when it's referred to in modern culture, we talk most about the grandiosity.
We talk about Trump, yo. I'm just kidding.
Sure, there's lots
But
of,
no, we do. People
there's
do
lots
say
of, you know, self-importance and crazy attention, validation.
so. That's the grandiose side.
Yeah,
That's this like narcissism out of balance.
Yeah, it could be more when you have these high traits of grandiosity, you know, you might require excessive admiration, or you might even exploit individuals or manipulate individuals to get your needs met. So you can see there's some maladaptive qualities there,
Right.
things that are not helpful.
And antisocial too.
It can, and often narcissistic personality disorder overlaps with other personality disorders,
Like
and that
coexisting
cluster B.
conditions or comorbidities. Is
Yeah,
that what you call them?
yeah. So there you can see a lot of the similar traits in individuals that might have borderline tendencies or antisocial behavior, and then of course there's sort of a cluster of personality disorder called the cluster B. So borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and then histrionic personality disorder. So
Those are clustered together.
yeah, they're kind of clustered together. So you see a lot of those traits kind of overlap, but you know.
The only one of those I'm not familiar with is the histrionic.
Yeah, so it can be a really strong need for attention-seeking behaviors, but on a grand scale.
Okay.
So that can lead to exploitation, things like that. Yeah.
So on one side of this spectrum, we have grandiosity, grandiose
Yeah.
narcissism.
Yeah.
What's on the other side?
Narcissistic vulnerability.
Narcissistic. Is that like the perpetual victim?
It's like the perpetual victim, someone that's super hypersensitive. They might be really emotionally reactive. Yeah. And
Someone who pretends to be sick all the time, maybe? Is that one?
Well, I
What is that
would say-
called? You know what I'm saying?
yes,
I forget the word for it. Anyway,
someone
that's like, I'm sick all the time. If you watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off, it was Ferris's friend. He was always sick.
I know exactly what you're thinking of, and it's just escaping me right now.
Me too. That's okay. If someone knows what we're talking about, put it in the comments, and we'll know then.
Yeah. So I would say, you know, it shows up. That is more, so we talk about the grandiose narcissism as more of the overt narcissistic traits, but the narcissistic vulnerability is much more covert, and it's not as maybe easily identifiable.
Really?
Yeah. So it might be harder to identify someone as being overly self-indulgent in their own victimhood, but that's certainly a thing.
Because it could be victims.
Yeah, they could actually be victims.
They could actually be victims,
for sure.
but also overindulging in it, where that's harder to figure out.
It can be harder to figure out, and I think one way to maybe break that down might be the inability to see how your own behavior is feeding a specific dynamic. So if you're constantly seeing yourself in this place of victimhood across a bunch of different environments, and it's like everything is happening to me all the time, like and this is congruent across a variety of different settings. Maybe this person finds themselves in a place of victimhood in their personal relationships, or maybe it shows up in their place of work.
Yep.
So when you see it cross different contexts, then I would say that you're starting to see more of that pathological behavior.
It's a strategy that they have for getting attention or getting some kind of social stimuli or
what I would say, and I think this is super important, is that when I think about narcissism, it's important to understand that if we're really being empathetic, that those narcissistic traits on both ends come from a place of pain. They usually emerge from a place of
there's trauma underneath that.
There's usually, and that's usually indicative in their family system in early childhood, where, you know, they might have had a rupture, an attachment with their primary caregiver, and that can look a lot of different ways. So it's interesting. And so when you think about it, you can imagine how somebody that has really high grandiosity appears on the outside to have a ton of self-confidence, but at the core, that sense of self is very fragile.
Yeah.
Because their sense of themselves, they have difficulty seeing other people as their own individuals, but more as an extension of themselves. So if you think of it, an example of that might be a parent who is overly critical of their child for, you know, really focuses on love being attached to achievement, academic pursuits, or, you know, but they're kind of living vicariously through their child. And when that child doesn't meet the mark, that's a reflection. They're perceiving that as a reflection.
Because their love is conditional. Yeah. They've shown them the conditions.
Transactional.
Yeah, transactional. Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. It leads me to share the intention for the time that we're having here, what we're talking about, and why we're talking about narcissism. And I met with Jamie like a week ago or 2 weeks ago about returning to the show and doing a series where we talk about personality expressions. I'm reluctant to say disorder. I don't like that word, but they are disorders. But the different ways humans express socially, psychologically, whatever we want to call it, and a lot of them are disorders. Whether it's OCD, borderline personality disorder, ADHD, narcissistic personality disorder, which we're talking about today. I wanted to normalize and kind of understand these expressions, these human expressions on one side, and also understand healing modalities on the other side, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, whether it's EMDR or, you know, a lot of the psychedelic stuff, the psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, whatever that's called.
Psychedelic assisted therapy.
That and anything else that's out there that you know about. I wanted to have a professional therapist come on the show and us have discussions about these things and take them one at a time. Like one talk would be about narcissism, or one talk would be about this healing modality. And through that, like, Jamie and I will develop a relationship over time where we get more comfortable with each other, and you guys will get to understand how people express.
Sure.
Yeah. And a big part of that is why they express, so that we can increase compassion and empathy.
Absolutely. I think it's so important to look at it through that lens, because, you know, when I say that individuals who struggle, and when I say to be diagnosed with MPD, there's a whole list of qualities or characteristics: grandiose sense of self, exaggerate. This is from the DSM-5.
Okay, we're going to go to the DSM-5 now. What are they?
Criteria: exaggerated achievements and talents, expects to be recognized as superior without commensurate achievements. So that's a big one. Preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty.
Okay.
They might be special, unique. I don't have to go through all the lists, but sense of entitlement, a big one. And then one of the hallmarks is that lack of empathy, the inability to really have that experience of love that is truly reciprocal, not just where they're able to experience love in a way where their experience with another individual is not attached to what that person can do for them, but it's reciprocal. Like they can experience empathy for where that person is at and actually reflect that back to a person rather than it being attached to
some transaction
or being conditional. Yeah.
And how many of those do they have to meet before they get the diagnosis?
So you have to meet you have to meet at least 5 or more of the following, and there's several, but I see narcissistic traits show up all the time in clinical practice and just in the world, but that doesn't mean that I'm going and diagnosing an individual with narcissistic personality disorder. I might be using that as, okay, I'm perceiving that. I'm noticing that we might have some personality driven traits here.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very, very hesitant to go and diagnose someone with a personality disorder.
I would imagine.
In terms of, because I'm going to be working with the set of symptoms regardless and trying to help them develop insight.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of the traits that when someone comes into practice, they might have narcissistic traits or borderline traits, and they might be coming to me because maybe they had this huge scandal or something happened or their life
it could be acute. It could be some life thing happened and now they're expressing that way.
Yeah, and it could look like they're having
a point.
Really they're in a depressive episode, but then as you delve deeper, you start to see, oh, okay, maybe this person's self-identity has been challenged in some way, or they've had this experience where it's just broken down. And so they might be coming in, in a like what appears to be like a depressive episode, but you're still noticing, like observing, like, okay, there's some traits here.
Is there like a narcissism that I just had this idea that what if the holistic aspect, what if you changed a handful of those things, like got them sleeping every day for 8 hours and got them eating healthy and exercising? Could narcissism personality disorder go away if they dial in their lifestyle?
So I would say in this case, this is less tied to like lifestyle changes, because most of how it shows up is in their interpersonal life and in their relationships with other people. And that's across a variety of different contexts.
Yeah.
So it's more difficult, I think, where when you're looking at depression, it's like, okay, how's your diet? How are you sleeping?
Yeah.
But when you're working with narcissistic personality disorder, a lot of times what's bringing that person into therapy is that their relationships are breaking down, or they're not able to see how their traits might be impacting people in the workplace. Maybe they're in a position of power, but they can't see how their inability to experience empathy is impacting their employees. Like continue working even though you have a sick child at home.
Yeah.
That inability to experience empathy. And so it shows up more in the interpersonal relationships and different environments.
You learned through your studies, all the DSM, you learned all these disorders.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely study them. You don't memorize. I mean, I
wonder if it's like, my buddy's a doctor and he had to like learn all these diseases. And he said, as he was like learning them, he was like, I've got that one. I've got that one. Have you ever thought you had narcissistic personality disorder?
I think that there's definitely things that you can look at when you're going through the criteria, and you're like, whoa, okay,
that's me.
Do I have struggle identifying needs of others in this specific context or something, like you can definitely get in your head about it.
Yeah.
And certainly, I mean, like I said, these things, they exist on a spectrum.
Right.
So we might have certain traits, but does that mean that we have like a full-blown personality disorder? Or even, and what I would say is it's never helpful to say to someone like, you have
this thing.
I mean, maybe I say never. I don't want to use absolute terms, but
what's coming clear to me is part of the diagnosis is feedback from the external, like feedback from your social systems, right? If they're like, oh, this isn't working because the way you're showing up at home in the family dynamic. And this isn't working because of the way you're showing up at work, this lack of empathy, this lack of like, you taking credit for
other people's
like
accomplishments.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And that happens. And then this community starts to kind of revolt.
Mm-hmm.
And then that probably drives isolation or being ostracized, or which can be a downward spiral in itself.
So oftentimes what you see when someone with those traits, their sense of self is challenged, then you can often see what they refer to it as like narcissistic rage.
They respond with anger.
They might respond with anger or reactivity, or they might, on the opposite end, withdraw, pull themselves away, withdraw from others, become socially isolated. Because this is, again, on the vulnerability side, thinking of themselves as maybe special or no one gets me. Their sense of, no one gets me. That's a big one, right? Like no one understands me. No one can see what I've gone through.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting thing. I've done a lot of self-reflection on this too, because I think when we see this in our culture, this term being thrown around, I think it's, for one, I think it's not helpful, but it also doesn't, if we over-identify and we're just calling someone else a narcissist, are we able to see how our own behaviors? It's very easy when someone has really strong personality-driven traits like that, where you can say like they're on the extreme end of the grandiosity scale, then oftentimes there is a victim. And oftentimes individuals who narcissists will often attract with very empathic people. And that's
if they could take advantage of.
Because there's a narcissistic supply. But when that breaks down and so if you think about their relationship with a narcissist might look in the beginning, it might look drastically different. It might look like a lot of when we say the term love bombing.
Yeah, love bombing. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Where it might look like very extravagant trips or gifts, or just, oh my gosh, I've never met anyone like you.
Because they're like pulling them in.
Yeah. And I would say it's not always intentional. It might even be completely subconscious. Not always, but
yeah. These people aren't like putting together a plan on their computer. Like, first I'm going to love bomb, then I'm going to, it's part of their default mode network, if you will. Like
it's how they've experienced love from this conditional way, and it's seeing it as being almost receiving love in a way that felt transactional, or maybe they were overly praised without their accomplishments really matching. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do see what you're saying.
So like this comes up a lot in this culture of like, are we building resilient kids? Or are we giving everybody a trophy that's not attached to any sort of real
action or behavior? Yes.
Yeah.
They need to go to some metric that says, I've excelled at this.
Yeah.
It needs to make sense.
It needs to make sense.
And I'm down with us having more metrics.
Sure.
I'm down with us saying, oh, it's not just who scored the most touchdowns. It's also,
right.
And I'm not a sports guy, so I'm gonna fumble on this one. I just use this sports one, but how many touchdowns, but also how many people blocked somebody who was running fast,
right.
or maybe got a ball out of the sky that was meant for somebody else, or somebody who, like, just a bunch of different ways to demonstrate success.
Right. Well, we talk about it too. It's like that experience with frustration and that learning space. And if we're just providing accolades without it being attached to achievement, without our children actually experiencing any sort of frustration as a result of losing, how do you build resilience? Yeah,
I got an aside here. I was listening to there's this radio show called Jubal. It's like this morning show where they do this second date update. Have you heard of this?
Yes, of course. Exactly. I love to listen to the radio, and I don't know why I'm old school. It's just my generation, I think. I grew up listening to the radio, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, so I'm going to share an event and tell me what you think. So this guy, he he found a woman to go on a date with.
Mhm.
They both were single parents.
Yeah.
And they had set a date. And the day the date came, he was like, oh my goodness, I need to cancel because my son's got a baseball game. And
Mhm.
so he let her know that. And she said, well, why don't we just go together to the game? And he was like, sure, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You're willing to go to one of my kids' games. So they went to the game, had a great time at the game, supported the son. I think he went and got popcorn for them. And she said, well, if you get me popcorn, I'll give you a kiss or something. So there was some like romantic energy. That seems like some real flirty stuff. So everything was going great. And then the son lost the game.
Mm.
And then they went to dinner afterwards and she never talked to him again. And he was like, I don't know what happened.
Wow.
We need to call her and figure out what happened. You know what happened?
What happened?
At the end of that dinner, the son asked for ice cream. And the dad said, you didn't win. No ice cream for you because you didn't win the game.
Wow. Wow.
And they were kind of split.
Yeah.
Some people were like, well, you could have a relationship where we celebrate victories. Like when you win the game, we celebrate with ice cream. But the mom was like dead set on,
Wow.
you just give the kid ice cream. And I was kind of torn too. I could see a little bit of both sides. Like,
I mean, again, I think it kind of feeds with love being like, that kind of ties into that aspect of, is this, if that kid experiences, you know, that ice cream as something that was his father providing him with, that is a gesture of love, then
yeah, do I
that
have to
being
win
taken
games to get
away,
your love?
and I have to, yeah, it just depends. Is it, so that's tough because it kind of, that goes back to that idea of, okay, if I don't meet this mark, is love being taken away? Now I think that's, I don't know how that child is experiencing, if that was a
Right.
part of their relationship, something that they celebrated together, and then it's like, no, you're taking this away from me
Yeah.
because I didn't win the game.
Maybe he could have done
Yeah.
something where he loved him a bunch,
Yeah.
but still said, hey, it's kind of a ritual that we have that when you win the game, we get ice cream, but I love you. You're an
Yeah.
awesome kid. I'm really proud of all the stuff. But the kid the dude on the phone call kind of doubled down on it. He was like, he didn't really run fast enough. He didn't really perform out there. The guy kind of turned out to be a little bit of a Chad, if you will. But
Well, I think then too, it's sort of like, how much are you living through
yeah.
your kid?
Yeah.
You know, where now his expression of love is tied to how well he did in the game. That's tough.
So you would have been on the ladies, the mom's side.
I mean, I think it's all how it's handled too, but I would say, yeah, if that was something that is generally a way that he sees that as an experience of a loving gesture, and that's taken away because he doesn't do something well. No, I don't know. You know, when I was in softball as a kid, like we would go and we would get ice cream when we won the game. It was like a thing that we all did.
What would you do when you lost the game?
We wouldn't go. And that was fine. But it wasn't like it was just implied.
Yeah.
It was sort of like, this is what you do when you win, but you don't go when you don't win.
Yeah.
And that, I never experienced that as like it being taken away from me. It's just like, oh,
it was a ritual.
It was a ritual. And the ritual existed when we won the game.
Right.
But I didn't feel like it was being taken away from me when I didn't win. It was just like, this
you
doesn't.
Probably got loved regardless.
Sure.
You get love. Love isn't
that's
about winning or losing the game.
Right, exactly.
But ice cream could be.
Well, and in this case, I'd probably lean on the side of
the mom.
The mom. Maybe yeah. Yeah.
This brings me to another question. Can narcissism only manifest in a male-bodied person?
No.
You sure?
I'm positive. No.
You mean there's lady narcissists?
Yes. So here's what I'll say. I actually pulled up sort of the statistics before just to kind of see where it was at, because it is more prevalent that it's diagnosed as a personality disorder in men. It's about around 7% in U.S. culture, and then around 4% in women.
Oh, really?
So it's still diagnosed in women, but it's
half as much. Do you think that's just they're not? But women in general are underdiagnosed for personality disorders. Is that true? I know for ADHD, they're underdiagnosed. Like, it's less likely that women get ADHD diagnosed than men.
Well, here's what I'll say is that if you look at the grandiosity, that shows up, and it's more, I think that those attributes tend to show up more it's more prevalent that those characteristics show up within the male population. But the narcissistic vulnerability,
The
those traits
victim
of
part.
is sort of equally dispersed between genders.
Men and women.
Yeah. And that, but what I would say, and this is maybe more anecdotal, is I think that I'm not sure that people are experiencing, when they hear narcissism, I'm not sure that they're thinking of it in the way of narcissistic vulnerability and this preoccupation with a sense of victimhood or things happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. And I had this conversation with a friend of mine today because he was asking me about my podcast and whatnot. And we were talking about it. And it was evident to me that it's like, okay, when he thinks of narcissism, he thinks of like somebody who's really has this really inflated sense of self. But when I shared with him, like, no, I'm actually going to talk about it being a spectrum and what it looks like on this other end of the spectrum. Yeah. And so to kind of give an example of how that might look from maybe a parenting perspective, maybe we can talk about what that is from maybe an emotionally immature parent who might rely on a child to meet their emotional needs.
They go emotionally dump on a child and expect them to hold space for them
maybe
with their old adult challenges.
At a place that's not developmentally appropriate to do so.
Right.
And not being able to experience, that sense of love, again, kind of being attached to the sense of victimhood. So.
Say that second part again?
Oh, I mean, that their sense of identity being so wrapped up in this place of victimhood. Yeah, sorry.
I'd see that. I've heard that happen where a parent will go to a kid and share family drama or what emotionally things they're going through, and the kid's like 10 or 12. And it's obvious they probably don't understand. They don't have the emotional maturity to support or hold space for that. But then the person who's doing it is someone they love and want care from.
Sure.
So they probably just...
Yeah, and that can be so... And I think we as parents, it's like we're not going to get everything right all the time, and certainly there's been times where I'm sure I've done that. And it's something that it's been, something I work on in my own therapy of especially if you're working with another parent, clarifying things versus emotionally dumping on them, and what does that look like, and trying to share things in a way that is developmentally appropriate for them to understand, where you're not placing yourself in this place of victimhood, where they're able to understand that there's a difference, I think, between like emotionally dumping and showing up as everything is happening to me, and versus like discounting the other parent or consistently blaming without really having the self-reflection to look at their own behavior.
And the thing I maybe struggle with could be on the other side of that coin or somewhere in the middle, wanting to share my emotional experience in a healthy way. Like this is what I'm feeling right now. These are the emotions that I'm experiencing right now, so that my kids can get that languaging, so that they can share their own experience, so that they can live that kind of vulnerable, authentic life where they say, I'm feeling sad.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I got these from Nonviolent Communication. I keep these all over the house, these feelings and needs cards. This one's got cobwebs on it.
I love that.
But I think it's important to be able to hone in on my internal landscape.
Yeah, absolutely.
And share it with my daughters. And I wonder, because sometimes they're like, that's not my fault. Like the response I'll get back from them, we said the message received is the message. I worry if the message they're receiving is, I'm feeling this emotion and it's because of you, as opposed to I'm feeling this emotion. That's just what's here right now.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's super important to be able to sort of teach your kids how to identify what it is that they're feeling. And, there's times where I think mirroring that, like I'm feeling really frustrated or overwhelmed because something happened at work, and I'm realizing that I need to take a step back.
Yeah.
Just go to my room, take some space so that I can be there for you guys.
Right.
So really being able to kind of identify your own emotions and teaching them to it's amazing. One of the things that I have in my therapy room at Bloom is the feelings wheel. We have a pillow. My colleague, she's amazing. We've worked together for years, but she brought in the feelings wheel. There's so many times that I'll use that in session because you realize the adults have such a limited vocabulary for the words that they might use to express their emotions.
Yes.
And if we can just develop a broader vocabulary for what it is that we're actually feeling,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a completely, I think we tend to maybe, anger. We're angry, we're happy, we're sad.
Well, there's in that there's only really 4 emotions. I don't know if this is true or not, but there's that Inside Out movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Which I think is a great movie for educating kids on emotions. And what is it? Anger, happiness, sadness, and what was the last one? Goodness. Anger, happy, sad, and
Anxious, was it?
it was like jealousy, maybe. I don't remember.
Envy, maybe?
Envy, maybe.
Yeah, I don't remember. But
anyway, from those, it kind of blossoms out into this language tree of like, oh, I'm not feeling happy. I'm feeling exuberant or.
Yeah. No, and I think.
Do you think there's only 4 or 5 emotions?
No. Oh my goodness, no.
Because there's a spectrum there of emotions. It could be.
I think so many. If we think about when I would work in acute, I worked in acute psychiatric. I still do part-time, but one of the things that I would do often with the teens in that setting would be kind of the anger volcano. And we would talk about how it expresses that anger. It looks on the outset as anger, rage, aggression. But underneath, what is it that you're experiencing?
Sadness.
Fear of abandonment, loss of control. So there's these other things. So it's really helping them. So it's like, okay, it looks like you're angry, but what's really going on? Oh, you feel left because that friend
Sadness.
has, like sad, or feeling abandoned because now my best friend has a new best friend.
Yeah,
so it's
sadness.
Yeah.
That's the fear seems to be a really prevalent or it's like a secondary emotion that comes over to protect the sadness or protect the fear. Because at least for men, I don't know if you've read that book, the Terrence Real book. I really don't want to talk about it. I have it over there.
I haven't read that one, but I'm reading one of his books called Us. I think it's.
Is it the relational one?
Yes, the relational.
I love Terrence Real. Yeah. The book is, I don't want to talk about it. If you want to borrow it, you're welcome to.
Oh, yeah.
But he talks about covert male depression, and its expression is anger. Oftentimes, and right underneath that is sadness, fear. Yeah. But it comes out as this like arrogance or this like.
So much.
They're sad.
So sad. And that's the thing is like going back to narcissism, their sense of self is very fragile. And that's coming from a place of being wounded. Somewhere in childhood, there was an experience that there was some sort of rupture with their attachment figure. Usually it's, closely tied to like a relationship with a mom or relationship with a primary attachment where they didn't fully go through those stages of development. And, there's a wound there that develops as a result of this developmental need that wasn't met. And, it can show up in a lot of different ways, but I don't know, it's just interesting. So if you can see someone that on the outside that presents in this way that seems very arrogant, entitled, they might show up. But then when you sit them down, you start to hear maybe some of their experiences of what they're going through. One of the things that shows up a lot is shame, this experience with shame. And actually that, if we're tying that into what are some really strong like clinical interventions for treating narcissistic personality disorder, it goes back to sort of helping the individual identify with these feelings of shame that are often like very deep rooted, because when they're not seeking external validation or those needs are not being met, or that, relationship breaks down and this person's no longer recognizing them or validating their experience, then they start to question, like, who am I then? If I, outside of this identity that I've cultivated for myself, usually at the core, there can be a really strong sense of self-doubt. There can be a lot of self-blame, criticism.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can, oftentimes I'll go back to sort of what is their experience like in childhood with, a parent, or was there a time, oftentimes what you'll find is like they might have had a parent that was either overly doting or overly critical. Or both, and on different ends of the spectrum.
How many people have had that? I mean, I think that's kind of classic parenting. You got the mom who, I remember going to my mom and she just want to hug and kiss and all this stuff when you first see her, and then it's like a little bit overboard.
Yeah.
Or like, well, that's probably not an example. It'd probably be like, take whatever thing you did and make it huge. Would get you there. But it has to be extreme and probably frequently to get to this place.
Usually it comes from like a very wounded place. And so to be able to cultivate empathy and really kind of experiencing what it's like through the lens of their childhood experience, trying to identify with, okay, what was it like? What was this experience like when your father came down at you, or, you didn't score the point or make the touchdown, and that experience of love was like withheld.
You didn't get the ice cream.
Or you didn't get the ice cream.
Can narcissists be in relationships and healthy relationships?
So, I mean, I think you see. So again, if it exists on a spectrum, what I would say is individuals that have a really strong, might even identify with NPD because they meet full clinical criteria, they usually struggle in relationships. I'm hopeful. I think social workers, we tend to look at things through a lens of optimism, strength-based perspective. So we're trying to help an individual see that your sense of self is not fully tied to this thing or this achievement or whatever it is. But the relationship parts can be really challenging, because if they're not, again, if they have this narcissistic supply and they're no longer experiencing that validation from the individual that they're seeking it from, then you could see how that breaks down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it might show up across a lot of different behavior patterns. Maybe it causes someone to go outside of the relationship. And
the partner or
maybe it might cause the partner
because they're fed up, or
well, it might look like maybe the person that has very strong narcissistic personality traits might seek validation outside of the relationship by conditional love with other people.
Yeah.
Because that supply at home is not being fueled. And so they need to have these experiences with other people that are filling that void.
Yeah, I could see folks that have this strong expression, this grandiose expression, being resistant to therapy, like not wanting to go into therapy or say, I don't have a problem, or,
So one of the biggest challenges when working with this personality trait or the disorder itself is that because they have this need for self-preservation, they're often not open to their sense of self being challenged in any way that would allow for meaningful insight into their behaviors or how their patterns show up in a relationship.
So that makes your job or the job of a therapist out there really hard.
It can be challenging, but again, like, it comes down to seeing what that person's really, what are they coming to you for?
Okay.
And that again, maybe something has broken down because this way of living, if you think about it, they're maladaptive coping skills or maladaptive behavior patterns that at some point, this is the thing, is that at some point, these patterns worked for them.
They worked for them.
They worked for
maybe when we talked about the narcissism character being in a binary with an empath. And maybe when that empath is depleted over many, many years and now has kind of had enough, and now there's starting to be challenges or resentment.
Right.
That's, it worked, but it worked, right?
Right.
It really didn't work. It was just someone hadn't matured, or someone hadn't really come to clarity about what was going on.
Well, the experience of love, it's trying to help someone develop empathy is a very difficult thing, so to being able to cultivate that with someone who might have really strong characteristics of not being able to experience things through the lens of another person, or really being able to resonate now through the lens of like self-compassion. And I think working with that piece of shame that is really coming from that place of woundedness, I think parts work is really good for this, like internal family
IFS,
system.
Yeah.
Because you're able to see like, okay, what's the behavior that we're working with that might look like a narcissistic personality trait. It might look like some
protector,
sort of extreme behavior or extreme need for, like impulsivity, but maybe it even leans towards the lens of like antisocial behavior, where someone is willing to engage in corruption through that need for power, right? But then that breaks down, and now who are they at the core? Because that sense of self is so tied to being in this place of dominance. And then, but you see that, and it's like, how often are those people coming into therapy? Are they able to see that, okay, this behavior or way of exploiting individuals is not a healthy way of being?
Yeah.
And at the core, are they truly happy? Are they able to experience love?
That requires intuition. That requires having some awareness into the impact of your behavior internally.
Yes.
If they're always in their head, they would just dodge, divorce, get a new partner, and say, I'm good, instead of thinking like, what is happiness? How's my nervous system through all of this? Am I supporting my mind, body, and spirit? And instead, like maybe 5 years down the road, getting cancer or some other like thing come up, because they're living in their brain shut off from their body, and they're,
I mean, what I would say is that it's difficult when someone meets full criteria for that, but that doesn't mean that they're not capable. I believe everybody is capable of change.
Yeah.
It's if you can help them develop enough insight and the capacity for experiencing love in a real, genuine way. And I think often this is why the therapeutic relationship is so important, because they may not have had an experience of real love. But if you have someone in your chair that's willing to talk to you about all these behaviors that they're engaging in that are not really serving them,
helpful,
but they might not have shared that with anybody else.
Yeah.
But they come into your chair and they're willing to divulge things that they've
That's step
never
one.
shared with anyone, right? And then they get to experience this relationship, and it is like love is an action, right? So when you're holding space for someone in a clinical setting, it's like you're actually showing them love. You're listening, you're trying to understand, like, okay, tell me what was your, like, I want to hear, like, how was love shown to you in childhood?
Tell me this. Let's talk about this for a second. We've talked about love, almost at times synonymous with empathy. How do you define love? What is love?
I think love is a feeling, but it's also an action.
Okay.
It's an action.
What does it feel like?
I think it feels like someone seeing you for who you truly are, with all your flaws, all your insecurities, the experience of feeling loved no matter what. So you
being
seen, showing up in your most vulnerable space with all your flaws,
and accepted,
and being accepted, truly accepted. But then it's like the action of love is when you're truly loving someone, you're providing them with that experience. Like, it's not for you. You're doing it out of the care. It's not tied to a need for reciprocity.
So love is the feeling of, I imagine it'd be comfort and safety in your authentic expression.
Sure. I mean, I think we can identify, and this kind of goes where, like, if you ask men and women how they experience love, I think you might get different answers.
Yeah, one's probably like physical. Men would probably be like physical, and women would probably be like
touch.
sharing resources.
Or
That's like kind of
safety, like feeling safe.
Yeah.
And that looks like emotional safety, maybe financial security.
Right.
Like it can look a lot of different things. But when I'll ask you, like, how do you experience love? Like, what is love to you?
Oh, I've been thinking about that.
Yeah.
I talked about it with Grant in the philosophy show that we did. We've talked about love a couple times, and we tried to define it. And it's a difficult one to define when I want to do it in my head. Because love is a body, it's a language that the body knows, but I don't know that it can be encapsulated with words. If I express that correctly.
I think it's easier just to
responsibility to the other in some way, a responsibility, an allegiance to the other.
Yeah, like a sense of loyalty. And I think an easier question, an easier way to answer that is, what does it feel like to feel loved? What does it feel like when
I
you
ask folks that when we do their life story? I always ask my guests, when did you have a felt sense of love with your primary caregiver, with your mom or your dad?
Yeah.
And I've thought about that in my own life. Like, when did those, because they're almost like, you can almost pinpoint them as events. Oh, I felt deep love and connection at this time or that time.
Right. And when was the absence of love really present for you? Like, when did you really experience love being withheld, or the absence of love in your relationship? Or
because you probably have, that's a good point. And I would imagine there's like baseline behaviors between people that might not feel like a great sense of love, but you've gotten that, what John Gottman called the love bank account has been, there's like plenty in there. So you assume love at all times because you've gotten these experiences of it. So then you endow the neutral times with, I'm still loved through this, and maybe even the negative times. I'm still loved even though there's challenge here. But that like 5 to 1, he said the ratio was 5 to 1. Positive to negative.
Yeah. And one of the things that he says is one of the biggest indicators of relationship failure is turning away from bids for emotional attention.
Yep. Yeah. Bids and contempt.
Bids for affection.
Contempt.
Yeah. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, yeah.
Criticism.
Defensiveness, contempt, stonewalling.
Stonewalling. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I got John Gottman's books here.
I mean, I love his stuff. I pull it in to a lot. It's very interesting, like working with couples, you can see how quickly that shows up. And it's very, it's very eye-opening because, when you're working with couples, you're kind of managing this really strong, energetic experience.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're trying to say the same thing. They just are not, and they're agreeing, but in their mind, maybe they're fixating on a detail, and their partner's not seeing this specific detail the way that. So, and then there might be a lot of criticism, and it's like, whoa, guys, let's just take a break here. Like, I think you're both trying to say the same things. You're just expressing it in different ways.
Man, I just got this overwhelming sense of what it must be like to be a therapist, sitting in your chair, and 2 intimate human beings walk in the middle of a context that you're oblivious to, and then it unfolds in front of you like I just had this thought of a small town at the bottom of a big hill, and there's like a dam at the top of that hill, and the dam breaking, and all of that water coming down. And you're, as a therapist, this town that's like, oh my goodness, now I need to pick through the pieces of what happened there and what's going on. That seems impossible. How do you do that?
Well, what I'll say is that oftentimes the thing that people think that they're coming into therapy for is not what we end up addressing.
Yeah.
And it might be part of it, but oftentimes we're like, okay, I think sometimes it can be something's hyper specific. Like maybe there's a really big life decision that needs to be made and they're not having an agreement on this big
Jamie,
thing.
I just want you to tell me that she's wrong and I'm right.
And it's interesting because once you start looking at it, you're like, oh, okay, there's so much more here that we need to work with, that we have to like identify and work with. And that can be super challenging. And one thing I think that is very humbling about being a therapist, and I always try to keep this in perspective, and I love Esther Perel's approach. She has a podcast that I listen to.
Okay.
That is, she'll do individual sessions and she'll record it with one session with a couple and they get one shot with her. And the way she's able to kind of manage the energy is just super interesting. But, you know, her approach and the way she's able to be directive in a way that's also compassionate. I really pull a lot of from her framework a little bit. Sort of just trying to understand, like, okay, what's really going on here? What need is not being met? That's a great question. It's like, what need do you have in this relationship that is not being met? And that can look so different for each people. Or let's look at your values. Let's look at what is your personal value system? And then what are your values as a couple?
Yeah.
And how are they misaligned?
Yeah, that reminds me that John Gottman, he talked about the 5 factors of trustworthiness, how we identify trustworthiness between two people. And one of them was alignment of values, ethics.
I think it's huge. Yeah, absolutely.
They don't have to be the same. You could both be robbers, but you both have to be robbers. So you have to have compatible values.
Well, I think it's helpful to have compatibility across your value system for sure. And what I will also say is if those values are, maybe you have a difference in terms of like how you approach different values, are you still able to respect an individual even if they have differing values?
That's where that contempt comes up.
Right. So you think about this in terms of like, you know, identifying an individual in relation to their political beliefs. Okay. Are you able to hold compassion for them and see them as an individual separate from this specific belief system? But oftentimes, and I think this is a great way to look at this, is that we all tend to kind of think about things. And Jonathan Haidt, he just wrote that he's written a few books, but he has a book out now called The Anxious Generation. But one of his, in The Coddling of the American Mind, he focuses on this idea that we think in cognitive distortions. And so we're oftentimes like personalizing things that might not even belong to us, or we're over identifying with, you know, specific values, and we're not able to separate and see this person as an individual separate from whatever their belief system is.
That's an inability to find the bridge. To relate.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting to look at it in that way, is how much are we personalizing this experience, or are we able to see this person's viewpoint as their view and not tied to who they are so strongly to where we're not able to.
It's making us fragile.
Yeah.
It's making us fragile socially. I want to have conversations with people that are different from me.
Well, I think we have to.
We have to. But if I have a disagreement, or if I have a different political lens or a different political, foundation, then the person's like, oh, canceled.
Well, see, that's the thing.
You're canceled. I'm going to get you off my Facebook thing. We can't even have
a conversation.
Well, then how do we move towards the middle? How do we...
So in clinical practice, we talk about this being like black and white thinking.
Yep.
All or nothing.
Yeah, thinking. All or nothing thinking.
And you can see this. This is one of the character we talk about, borderline personality traits. That's one of the hallmarks of borderline personality disorder, is this tendency to have extreme ideation, like really strong feelings for someone, and then going to this other opposite end of that spectrum where we're devaluing someone, or it becomes hypercritical.
Isn't that our political landscape right now?
And I think there's so much
Do we
there.
talk about these things in any other way other than like, if this person wins, it's going to be Armageddon. And if this person doesn't win, if this person wins, we're going to get all the things you want in the world,
So this is the way that I've been able to navigate that, because it's coming up so much in one of the ways that I've been able to sort of navigate this, because I want people to feel like some therapists might have a boundary around discussing that at all. I don't have that boundary, because for me, it's, again, I try to go back to how are we thinking about this if we relate it back to cognitive behavioral therapy, and we're thinking about reframing our thoughts, reframing a distortion where we might be catastrophizing in a specific way out of fear. It's really, I found it to be much easier to navigate when we're like, okay, well, what is causing you to go to this worst case scenario? And so it's sort of like, okay, well, let's step back, and what are some of the daily practices that might have you going down these rabbit holes where it feels like this is so intense? Sometimes you're telling them like, okay, maybe we should just take a step off of social media a little bit. So we're not just inundated with all of this algorithm just continually feeding us.
I think you should just tell everybody that at the onset of therapy, or just have the shirt. Why don't you just take a step back from social media for a sec?
Well, and it's interesting, but where I look at that in terms of like how we're navigating politics through a therapeutic lens, is sort of like, okay, I think people have their own individual value systems.
Yeah, we do.
And we have our individual value systems, and there is a sort of a general understanding that like we're not going to get everything we want with any candidate, right? And so there might be things, and I think more people, if they were able to have these nuanced conversations, would realize that, wait, we have way more in common than we thought.
We really
do. We're not able to get there.
Yep.
So if we can bridge this connection.
We start with the fringes.
Right.
Why don't we start with the beginning and get a whole, it's like the John Gottman 5 to 1. We need to build that relational bridge with all the things we agree on.
Yes.
Which I imagine is a lot.
Yeah. And so if you can get them to say, okay, so this value is super important, and I can completely understand why that's so important to you, because that is impacting your family in a very significant way, or it's challenging your personal autonomy. So it makes so much sense to me that you're so closely tied that you would want to vote one way, even based on what specific issue, right? And so from this framework of we have these individual values that are really important to us, and there's this other person that also has their own values, and they might look different for each individual. And there's a sense of knowing that like we're not going to get everything we want, but can we the way I say like, I think people tend to vote knowing that they're not going to get everything they want, but they're going to vote in alliance with the values that are most important to them.
Question, bringing it back to narcissism for a sec. Do you think it's possible, given how news is so polarizing and skewed, and it's hard to know what's real, and it's all seen through a frame of someone's kind of end goals. Do you think it's possible to diagnose a candidate as narcissistic through the reports that we hear through media, or through like observing them speaking? And I'm like kind of dog whistling Trump. Do you think it's possible to look at what the news says about him and what we can see through his speaking engagements? Can you diagnose?
I mean, I think that there's a lot of, if you think about some of the character traits that he exhibits and some of the personality traits that have gotten him to where he is, there's certainly things that he meets.
You're looking at that list. Which one do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's a sense of entitlement for sure.
Entitlement because I'm just going to give an example of it. And I'll just say this right now. This isn't really a political show. I would talk to someone who is my best friend turned into being a Trump. He's a Trump supporter, and I love him. I still converse with him, and I would never cancel anybody. I wasn't huge either way, to be honest.
Right.
I didn't think there was a good choice. But so I think an example of that would be presenting himself as a self-made man in a world where his dad started him off with like this $1 million
Yeah.
kind of loan. Would that be an example of that?
Oh, okay. So you're saying like sort of, how would you characterize that? What would you say? How would you frame that behavior?
Well, it was the one you just said.
Misrepresenting himself.
Yeah, he's presenting himself as this like self-made man. Like I did it. I pulled my boots up by my bootstraps, and I made it out there. And not acknowledging the tremendous privilege and support that he had through his father and his father's relationships and connections.
Well, I think, is there that capacity to be self-reflective and really introspective? If you're able to represent yourself in that way, and that is not in line with the objective reality, like maybe there was, as you said, like he had support from an early age. Now, that being said, I think people have said that I think I've heard it thrown around in media, and that he's often used as I think he's an interesting person. He has a lot of these characteristics, right? Craving attention, requiring admiration. I mean, you could say
an example of craving attention would be he putting his last name on buildings everywhere.
Maybe.
And being on TV and wanting to be. Trump has been in the media since I was a child.
Long, sure. Yeah. We grew up in that generation.
TV shows, on the side of buildings. Trump has been a brand since I was a kid.
Sure. Yeah.
That'd be an example of that. What's another one?
I mean, I think it's interesting because you see how his behavior when he's talking and when he's speaking, his display of what people might say is like confident or arrogant, so that's,
you got to be confident if you're a president, though.
The thing is like how much of that, but I think he owns it. He's just kind of like, this is who I am. And there's
he does.
Aspect of this is who he is. And now, I don't know, there's a lot of different ways. Now, on the other end of that, are there some of the criticisms being some of the exploitative behaviors, or
where he like wouldn't pay the people that worked on his projects?
Perhaps.
Like he just like
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism in terms of like how he's operated businesses and stuff, right? Like he's definitely so. But what I think is super interesting too is I always encourage people. I think what I have appreciated is his willingness to go on sort of long form podcasts.
Yeah, he went on Theo Vaughn, he went on Joe Rogan, and they just went.
They just went.
He did the weave, baby.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you hear him speak and stuff. It's like there's some aspects where it's like he can be very endearing. He can be super charismatic.
He didn't get where he got by not being endearing and charismatic.
And so I don't know. I mean, I think that people should really take the opportunity to hear people. I don't think the way that the debate format, for example, is the best display.
Oh, that was ridiculous.
I think we need to be encouraging these long form conversations where you're hearing these. And there's a lot of aspects of his personality that are super compassionate too.
Well, the debate has basically gotten to be, okay, now tell me your talking points. Now tell me your talking points, as opposed to what you're saying, and I agree with, a longer format conversation where we see people's character, where we see people's, their value systems play out, as opposed to their like the value systems of the platform that they're running on top of.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is, he has been able to connect with people throughout a variety of cultures, right? And I think that's so interesting is like you see how he's been able to connect with sort of middle America and the working class, and just his involvement in the UFC and things like that speak to maybe middle America. And I'm big in the martial arts. So the way that he's been able to kind of captivate certain audiences, I think, is really fascinating. And there's this election cycle has just been really interesting all the way around, because we've seen shifts in terms of the way people have voted across cultures too. So it's just been a really interesting cycle.
Yeah.
I hate to go to say like, yes, he is this,
Well,
right?
we can't
Because
do
it
that.
kind of, right.
I
It
don't.
kind
I
of
think the
goes,
answer to that is you can't do
it's
that.
like you should, and I don't think you should.
No,
Because if you,
we don't know
again,
Trump the man. We
right.
know Trump the character.
I mean, he has a persona, right? But then I think when you start to understand a little bit more about who he is through these long form conversations, and I wonder if people are so put off by him, if they're able to even allow themselves to hear him
Yeah.
talk. And what I would say to everyone is just the ability to, are we going to this place where we're shutting down to where we're not even willing to hear the other side? And I think that's a dangerous place to be, because I think we should be doing that with everyone. We should be inviting that type of conversation, and we should be hearing people out and really understanding who they are as a person. I mean, I listened to Vladimir Putin on, I think it was on Tucker Carlson, or I listened to him.
Yeah, when he went to Russia. Yeah.
Yeah. And also I listened to him, I think on, I don't know if he's been on Lex Friedman's podcast or what, but he was on a few different podcasts. And it's like, I think it's interesting to understand they're just people.
They're people.
They're people
with values, and they're making decisions.
values.
I think that demonization of these cultures,
Yeah.
that's almost this neo iron curtain-y type of thing, this like anti-communist thing, isn't helpful. We should look at people as humans. What happened there? What's going on? What are their motivations? What are their values? You know, I
Yeah.
could see him being scared of the NATO getting more powerful and that being a threat to that whole country or whatever. But I don't think we're getting all of that information.
I mean,
and there's a value to listening to them.
I think it's super important. And I try to look and listen to a variety of different perspectives and a lot of different types of podcasts. And I really gravitate towards the individuals who are not afraid to have individuals who might differ from their value system on, or to even just challenge themselves to meet with world leaders that are highly controversial.
Yeah.
You know, and be able to put themselves at physical risk to be able to put these conversations out there.
Yeah.
I really value that, because I think that's where you start to understand, and people are neither all bad or all good.
No.
And that's where I think it really, from a psychological perspective, is like, I mean, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I did if I didn't have the capacity to try to really understand, like, who are they at the core?
Yeah.
You know, how did this identity construct itself?
And maybe to believe that they're good, that there's goodness in there.
We all have the capacity for good and evil. And if I don't think that and that can be on extreme scales. And I think we have to have that understanding about ourselves as individuals, and understand that as well as it relates to other people. That at the end of the day, when we think about, you know, even world leaders who are responsible for horrific things, you know, but like I think this is really interesting. I think a way to maybe identify. It's interesting when you think about the characteristics of world leaders. If you were to put those characteristics out and identify this person, maybe all these different world leaders that we find maybe very controversial, and we were able to obscure their name and then identify them in terms of like, okay, let's break down
behavioral expressions,
these personal expressions of behavior or character attributes as it relates to a specific person. And if we were able to shield that person's name, like how would we, if we were able to say like, okay, here's all these attributes that are related to this specific individual, and we're not going to say what name that's associated.
Well, then we're just voting for attributes.
Then we're just voting for attributes. And are these qualities that maybe some of these leaders possess, maybe they manifest in some of these behaviors that are extreme, right? But if you look at them as the attributes of like, what does it look like from a leadership perspective? Are those some attributes? Are there some attributes of leaders where we can see that like this person is still neither all bad or all good? They still have these leadership qualities. Did it manifest in this horrific way? Maybe. But are we still able to say like their leadership qualities are still there? They were able to for better or worse, they were able to, I think that's what's fascinating about it, is like we're able to gather people and,
Yeah.
you know, and that's
Get a
dangerous. That can be
backing.
dangerous.
Bring a platform. Yeah,
Right.
that takes a lot of succeeding,
Mm-hmm.
which leads me to kind of a sidestep here. Is capitalism pro-narcissism?
Mm.
I guess I read a study about CEOs or executives at these top businesses and a certain percentage of them being narcissist or having lacking of empathy. And that being almost a requirement to ascend to these higher levels of employment.
That's interesting. That's a really good question. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it, but what I will say, that's a tough question to answer. Is it
capitalism is like, if it really nurtures, I'm not a big fan of capitalism. I'll just say.
Well, what I would say is it's like, how closely is that tied to someone's sense of self-preservation?
Is being successful. Well, those that have being successful tied to life and death survival,
right,
they're going to be the ones that strive the hardest to do, you know, whatever is necessary to achieve it, I would imagine.
Right.
People that are namaste are just going to be like, okay, man, that seems like this is your thing. I'm not willing to do that.
I mean, again, I try not to be so black and white in anything.
Right.
I think you should try. Right. I think it's really important to try to be able to say, like, there's some attributes of this that can be really dangerous, and that can, if we go 100% in this direction, it can be destructive.
Yeah.
You know, so are there attributes of, you know, where things go wrong? And you see this like with your understanding of, you know, like communism coming from a lot of these ideas seemingly being like they could be really good in theory, but then they kind of break down.
Execution.
Yeah, it's on the execution.
I said earlier I don't agree with capitalism, but I really just am disenchanted, or I don't think that our version of capitalism that we're practicing right now is distributing wealth in an effective way.
Okay.
I feel like it's like if we were a bunch of people that needed water to drink in order to live,
sure,
we've got a handful of folks that are glaciers and a lot of people that are thirsty. And so we have wealth kind of tied up in these huge places that we can't unlock, and a lot of people that are thirsty and need it. And I think if capitalism is a process through which we distribute and share wealth, I don't think it's working for us right now.
I mean, certainly there's a lot of areas that you could see where the disproportionality, right? Yeah. Right? We see that across cultures. And so, but
just look at Bernie Sanders if you want to know more about that. He does a great job
of articulating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so complicated, right? And then it comes down to like these more nuanced, like systemic issues, and how are we handling things on a systemic level? Like how are we utilizing our tax dollars, and are they being distributed effectively?
We're talking about Doge now.
And the way that we're like, actually, some of these programs, maybe they sound really good in theory, but do they fail on the execution? I think that's something that as I become, you know, I think as you go through, as you emotionally mature, maybe your values over time change, or maybe you go back to like your roots in a sense, and you start to see that maybe some of the ideas and theories that, or ways of solving problems that you thought in theory sounded really great, but then you see how the execution really fails.
Yeah.
Then it makes you kind of go back and say, okay, well, this thing that was presented to me is helping a lot of people, but it seems to be failing on all these different levels. Then I think we have to really question how we're executing certain
Maybe
things.
Go back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to say about narcissism as we kind of wrap up this section? What has been unsaid? Yeah. Final thoughts on narcissism.
We went a lot of different ways.
We did.
Went a lot of different
It's like,
directions.
it was ADD-tastic.
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, I just want to kind of highlight, like, there's a theory, maybe, I think we didn't really talk about. One of the questions that I thought might come up is, are we becoming more narcissistic
As a culture?
Culture.
I think that's what I was maybe hinting at with, does capitalism lend itself to, does it positively reinforce narcissism?
I don't know. I was thinking about it more through the lens of social media and technology.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was thinking is, as I was looking at this, it's sort of, you know, there was some, as I was kind of delving into this, it's like you look at narcissism cross-culturally. And one thing that I think that you can learn is that the US is, or that we can study or we can look at from the framework of like individualist culture versus collectivism, individualism versus collectivism.
Right.
And how one might be promoting attributes of narcissism, where individualist culture would promote maybe attributes of narcissism, whereas collectivist culture might have some protection against that, because it's so based in the need to protect the community and the community being grounded in the sense of like duty to one another. Whereas individualist culture, you know, American culture is very individualistic.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the ability to pursue anything you want and become as wealthy as you like. And then you think about that cross-culturally. But now everybody has social media. Everybody has access to social media, or, you know, throughout the world, we have access globally to social media. So that people have the ability to present themselves in a way that might be self-indulgent. So there could be the argument of like, is social media causing us to be more narcissistic? I don't know.
You think?
I think that, again, I kind of go back to this idea of, is someone being confident in their expression of how they're using it, or is it seeking external validation? Are we using this platform as a way to seek external validation? And when we don't get it, is our sense of self being challenged? So like when we don't get the likes, when we don't get the clicks, or...
I want the likes, Jamie.
You know, I think it's...
I want the clicks.
Of course.
I'm in this space now because I put this out there, and there is like...
But let me ask you this. Is there like a dopaminergic response that you get? I mean, I think...
Probably.
Natural, right? Like, it's nice to feel like that sense of validation, like, oh, I'm doing a good job.
I want to like contribute in a positive way, and there's like a feedback loop of that, of like, yeah, when someone says...
It's inherently bad, right?
No, it's not inherently bad.
It's like, how are you using it? Now, if an individual feels like their sense of self-identity crumbles because they're not receiving those things and they're not getting that feedback, then I would say that we have to like revisit that.
Yeah. I kind of want to be 10 steps back from it, kind of like put it in there and then not death scroll, kind of utilize it for my own means, but not get wrapped up in it.
Yeah.
But it's hard. Like, I want to see the metrics.
Sure,
I want to see positive metrics.
You want to see it. Yeah. You want to see.
And when I don't, I feel disappointed. And like, what am I doing? Is this working? You know?
But again, it's kind of rooted in this value of like giving back and providing value to a community.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true. That's true.
That's like your value is to be able to provide. It's being in service to others.
Yeah, you want to be in service.
Tied to that value, and I see that come through with you. As it's I'm looking at it like, no, but I want to put this out there. I want to challenge myself in a way that helps people understand me in a way, or even be vulnerable to my own experiences, or challenge myself in a way where I have to look at some of the qualities about myself through conversations that might come, you know, like you're putting yourself out and being vulnerable, and it's not easy. And then you're also providing the service of bringing all these scholars and people that are really well versed in their profession, like some incredible scholars and people that have been on your podcast, and that's a value to people. People need information.
I think people need information.
Yeah.
We need more than folks that are able to make the largest M&M ever known to man.
Well, I
I
think
saw a video of someone who
you
took
did.
like $300 worth of M&Ms and made one big M&M. It had 1 million views. And I was just
A
like,
million views. You're like, really?
damn, that's what's
It's always interesting to me.
entertaining people.
It's always interesting to me, like what goes viral, you know, and sometimes it's the most.
A big M&M, apparently.
Yeah. I'm like, really?
All right, speaking of a big M&M, now we'll goof off a little bit before we talk about your life story.
Okay.
We goof off by, those were kind of Phails 5 questions, but we didn't really 5 question it. We kind of just had a meandering discussion. We play improv games.
Oh my goodness.
Have you ever done this?
No.
Are you nervous?
Yes.
What's the worst case scenario?
Oh my goodness.
Nervousness or anxiousness is like a belief that in the future something's going to go bad.
Yeah.
So what's going to go bad?
For the future.
What's going to go bad?
I freeze.
You'll
I
freeze?
don't come up with the right answer, or I say something impulsively without thinking through my thought.
Hold on. So the first one you freeze.
Freeze.
The second one is
like poverty of thought. Can't think of anything.
Can't think of like totally. And the third one is you say something like that's silly.
Or maybe I'm not able to edit myself. Maybe I say something without thinking it through. Maybe something that I wanted to have a little bit more discretion around.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, those are all valid. I don't think you'll do that. We'll play games that like, what if we played games that didn't lend themselves to those problems?
Okay.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
That's a good question.
You.
Yeah.
This requires trust.
Oh, yeah. Trust. These are improv warm-up games.
Okay.
So a lot of them are just like making silly sounds and moving your body in silly ways.
Oh my gosh. You're really pushing me out of my
that's
zone.
Pushing. That's like.
I mean, on camera.
So being silly on camera.
I think it's almost, this is probably more tied to the context and the persona that I'm coming in is like, okay,
you're a professional and now I'm going to get silly.
Like have me get silly and who's going to see this and
they're going to see you silly. What'll happen then when they see you being silly? They'll be like, she can't be professional. She was silly.
No, I mean, I think it's good for me. I need to be more silly. I tend to lean more into the realm of seriousness.
Well, you need to be serious. You need to be taken seriously in your profession. And I think serious people can be silly.
Yeah, they can. Both and. Right?
And I acknowledge that. I guess
I'm sure I'm getting red.
I'm sitting into that like place of, I want to be a professional. I just thought like, could Noam Chomsky come in here and like, I talked to him about, wage slavery and all this stuff. And then I'd be like, okay, Noam, now let's play some improv games.
All right. I'm really trusting you here.
Noam Chomsky would be a good person to play these games with. Do you think he would do it?
I don't know. Super interesting.
Let's do an easy one, which is it's either called Mind Meld or Convergence. And this is one, it's really easy. Deep breaths. This one isn't even that silly. It's really a practice of you and I trying to come together on a word, converge on a word.
Like synchronicity?
Synchronicity.
Okay, yeah.
It's called Mind Meld.
Okay.
And so what we'll do is we'll count to 3 together, and then we'll say a word. You'll black out your mind and then some word will come. And that'll be the first word, the first 2 words that will start this attempt to converge.
Does it have a theme or it can just be literally the first
thing? It will have a theme. We will co-create a theme through the first 2 words. And then we find the converging word together.
Okay.
It took Jennifer and I like 5 or 6 times last time. I did it with one guest on the first word. We said the first word was the same, which I don't know. I think that's telepathy. I think telepathy tapes. I think we telepathied it.
That is crazy.
It was crazy.
Because you didn't even have...
You know how many words there are in the English language?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's wild. And you said the same thing.
The same word.
You
ready?
Interesting. Okay.
We don't have to do that.
We can,
but we don't have to.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to count to 3. So close your mind, like blank out your mind and then think of a word. Okay. I'm going to give me 1 second. You kind of pull it from the void, this like putting your hand in a dark hole and pull out a word. Mine would be, okay, I got one.
Okay.
And then we count to 3 together. 1, And then we do 1, 2, 3, and then the word on
Okay.
4. Okay?
Okay.
1, 2, 3, astronaut.
Cohesion.
Astronaut, cohesion.
Cohesion.
Cohesion. Astronaut, cohesion.
Okay.
Okay, those are the 2 words that influence the next word we say.
Astronaut and cohesion.
Astronaut and cohesion.
Okay.
Okay.
This is tough.
Is it?
I don't know. It's tough for me.
What's
I'm like,
the unifying? How would we unify
How would we
astronaut and cohesion? I've got something. Astronaut and cohesion.
Okay.
You got
I
something?
think so.
1, 2, 3, inner space. Inner space and gravity.
I like that. Yeah.
Like I brought the movie
Yeah.
Inner Space and you brought Gravity. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Gravity and inner space. Gravity and inner space. Gravity and inner space. Where's the...
Oh, okay. I've got it.
You got it. See, you got it. So now I'm just going to try to, instead of thinking of my own word, I'm going to try to telepathy your word.
Okay.
Gravity and inner space. Think your word.
I don't know if this makes sense at all, but this is what came to me. I'm going to go with it.
I've got one. It came to me a couple times. I don't know if it'll work, but let's just go with it.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, apple.
Void.
Apple and void. Okay. Apple and void.
Okay.
I think I've got something.
You've got something.
Yeah, I've got something.
Okay.
Apple and void.
I feel like this is where your tech mind might come into play.
I don't know. I don't know. We're gonna converge.
Apple and void.
Void and apple. Void and apple.
And you've got something already.
I've got something.
Okay.
1. You do the 1, 2, 3 this time.
1, 2, 3.
Black
core.
hole.
I said core. I feel like we're getting closer.
Black hole and core.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I feel like we're
black
getting
hole
closer.
and core. I think we are too.
Yeah.
Black hole and core. I think I've got one. Black hole and core.
Black hole and core.
I'm sending it to you.
You've already got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Man, I feel like we're so close. Like
Try not to think too much.
Yeah, this is what I do. This is now like my nervous system.
Stop thinking at all. Like black out your mind and become receptive to
black hole.
Intuition.
Wait, black
core.
hole and core.
Core and black hole. Core and black hole. It's okay.
Core, black hole. See, this is how, do you see I'm overthinking?
You're doing great. What would be the core of a black hole?
I don't know.
Me neither.
Okay, got it.
You do? 1, 2, 3, star.
Emptiness.
Star and emptiness. Star and emptiness. Star and emptiness. I like emptiness. That's pretty good. Star.
Star and emptiness.
Now I'm going into like...
I was gonna say, are we getting something? Are we going in a different direction here?
I was. At least what was starting to come to my mind was...
Star and emptiness. Well,
because an empty star is a black hole.
Yeah.
Right? It like...
Yeah.
collapses in on itself.
Man.
Okay, let's just do it. Let's stop thinking. Let's stop thinking by going faster.
Okay.
You don't have to come up with one. We'll do no more of that.
Okay.
Let's just count and come up with it. So 1, 2, 3.
3.
David Bowie. David Bowie and fire. David Bowie and fire. Okay.
We both went in complete different directions.
Yeah, we did. We did. That's good. That's good. It's good. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Firehouse. You didn't get one. David Bowie and fire. New one. New choice. David Bowie and fire. 1, 2, 3. Man.
Rock and roll.
Man, rock and roll.
Oh, okay. We can do this.
Man and rock and roll?
Yeah.
Rock and roll man. Who's the rock and roll man?
Ready?
1,
2, 3.
Rolling Stone.
Okay, that was a good one.
Rock star and Rolling Stones. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. The Beatles. Mick Jagger and the Beatles. Okay. Mick Jagger and the Beatles. Man, the Stones and the Beatles, they didn't. You either liked one or the other.
I know. I like both.
I mean, I like both.
I like both now. But then maybe.
But back then, it was like you were a Beatles dude or you were like a Stones dude. That's what my dad said. Okay. Mick Jagger and the Beatles. Okay. Like 1, 2, 3. Paul McCartney.
I was literally going to say that and it just like.
You were going to say Paul McCartney?
Yes.
We'll count it. We got a mind meld. We got a mind. This is a silly dance and song you sing. Mind meld.
You see
how you were really going to say it?
No, I was. That was like, but this is how like freeze and then I can't form the words.
You freeze and you can't form the words.
Yeah.
But it was there.
It was there. It was on my tongue. Yeah, I think so.
Honor system.
Like it was like in my head and I thought about saying it. And then when I went to say it, I was kind of watching you. And I was like, okay, that's close enough. Yeah. That was there.
Yeah. That whole idea of this is it's like an exercise of relating. We're trying to pull our cultures together into some unifying culture.
That's super cool. That's such a fun exercise.
Yeah, let's try it again.
Okay.
Ready? We'll start from nothing.
Okay.
So 1, 2, 3. Ham sandwich. What'd you say?
Parrot.
Ham sandwich parrot. Okay. Ham sandwich parrot. I've got it.
How?
Ham sandwich parrot.
Ham sandwich parrot. Okay.
Ham sandwich parrot.
Ham sandwich parrot.
You got it? Do you want a hint?
Yes.
Polly?
Oh my goodness.
1, 2, 3.
Polly
cracker. Here was my thinking. We kind of got it. Here's my thinking. A ham sandwich. What would be food for a parrot?
So I was thinking the phrase, like, Polly wants a cracker.
I just broke it down to like, okay, what is a sandwich? Sandwich is food.
You said Polly.
Here's a cracker.
Yes.
I mean, here's a bird.
Okay, I see.
A parrot. So now we have a parrot. What is food for a parrot?
Yeah.
Cracker.
No, when you said Polly, I was like, okay, wants a cracker.
Polly wants a cracker.
Does the phrase count?
I mean, sure.
Or you're just supposed to say the word, like cracker.
I mean, there's no
phrase was there.
There's nobody judging us.
So funny.
Except for those people out there. Okay, let's try it again from the beginning. Now you're kind of getting the swing of it.
Yeah, I can see how you're bridging connections to try to create some sense of cohesion.
And what I need to do is figure out how you're doing it. And we figure out how we're both doing it. And then we'll unify.
Yeah.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Light bulb. Light bulb and curtain. Light bulb and curtain. Oh, okay. 1, 2, 3. Sun.
Illuminate.
Sun and illuminate. Sun and illuminate.
Okay, I've got one.
You do? 1, 2, 3. Shade.
Glow.
Shade and glow. We're kind of okay. Shade and glow. Oh my goodness, that's not gonna be it. Brain. My brain was like lava lamp, and I'm like, what even? Shade. Where would that even happen? Shade and glow. Shade.
Okay.
Okay. I've got one. Well, hold on. Let me think of the word.
I feel like
How
we're
I'm gonna say
here.
it.
We should be able to get this. Shade and glow. Seems like an obvious thing. Maybe to me. At least.
No, it's obvious to you.
Okay.
No
It's
pressure on this guy. Okay.
obvious.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Lamp.
Lampshade.
Okay, we got
Lampshade.
it.
Yeah, we got it. Let's call
We got
that.
it.
Let's call
Lamp.
that.
Lamp.
Okay. That is mind meld.
Yes. Okay.
You
So we
only
got it. The
partial
shade
freeze. Yeah.
and the glow.
Lampshade.
Lamp.
Or lamp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Close
like
enough.
lamp.
Okay.
No, the movie.
Next one is, let's see, which one's least silly? Soundball or mirror cat?
Mirror cat.
Mirror cat. Okay, I'm a cat and you're the mirror.
Oh my goodness. What does that mean?
What does that mean? What would you do if you were a mirror?
What I do? I'll go like this.
I'd be the mirror. But you're the
So
mirror.
I'm the mirror.
Yeah.
Okay. So what am I doing here? Okay. Okay. I see what we're doing.
And then at a certain point, in this mirror, I could be a cat.
Okay. Other hand. So silly.
Yeah, it's silly. You got this. At a certain point in this like mirror cat, you take the reins of the game, right?
Okay.
And I'll follow you.
Okay.
But we're not gonna tell anybody when that happens. And sometimes I'll take it and oh God. And we won't tell, and we will only know.
Okay. Oh my gosh. I can't believe
It's too fast. It's too fast. Goodness. Death by silliness.
Did you do that?
I would. Yeah, I would. Heck yeah, I would.
That's good.
They're too cool for it now.
Yeah. Did you used to do these types of games with them when they were little?
They've come with me to improv.
I love
to
that.
improv community. I took my younger kiddo through improv facilitator training workshop we did. She was participating like
awesome.
the whole weekend.
I love that.
She's awesome.
That's so cool.
She'd get up on
I
stage.
mean, I think here's the thing is I think these types of things, while they push me out of my comfort zone, it's so necessary for me to do that kind of stuff. Because there's this feeling of, what I would say is one of the attributes in people that I love the most is humor.
Yeah.
But I think it's just because I'm so serious. So I admire that quality, like witty, quick humor is such a gift.
Yeah.
And so to be able to like think on your feet and to say the right thing and have really good comedic timing, I think is amazing.
I do too.
And I think I admire that quality in people so much because
you want that quality.
I want that. Yeah.
You want to see that in yourself.
Yeah, I want to see that.
You could do it.
Yeah. Do you think humor is something that you can develop?
Absolutely.
Yeah, like it's a creative process.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have you watched any of the podcasts where comedians talk about the process of comedy?
Oh, yeah.
Where they talk about how, it's not,
I love
they're writing all the time. They're developing stuff on the stage. They're like, what gets, what gets a response from the audience? And then they're like, okay, that one does. I'm going to put that one. It is a process. It's a creative process. And you can definitely nurture and strengthen that, I think.
Yeah, I just love comedy so much, and I really love to see people come out with material that they're just kind of, starting to develop, and then you'll see it again. Like I'll go back and like frequent people and kind of, see the material develop over time.
Who do you like?
There's so many. We have some great local comedians.
Well, we do now because everybody followed Joe Rogan. Yeah.
Pretty much stole the LA comedy scene.
Yeah.
So we have a lot.
You've been to the Mothership?
Mm-hmm.
I have too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw one of Joe's thing. Well, it was Joe's kind of him and his friends or whatever, where he kind of did the headliner. It was goodness, now I'm blanking. Brian Simpson. It was what's his name? The old dude with white hair. Tony talks about golfing and
Mm.
poops. I'm blanking on them, but the guy who does Kill Tony, Tony Hinchcliffe.
Yeah.
Saw him. I saw. It was a good night. It was a good night.
Yeah.
I like a lot of different comedians. I was raised on.
Oh, you saw Ron White.
Yeah, Ron White.
Yeah, he's a legend.
It was. Yeah, he's a legend.
He's amazing.
And he was hilarious. He just held court.
No,
like the way he does it.
He's been in the game for so long.
So long.
He's such a professional.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen him several times now, and he's just amazing.
Well, he's Austin. He's local now.
He's a local. There's a new guy. Well, he's not so new. He's been here for a while now, but Ari Matti.
Okay.
He's from Estonia. So kind of the joke is they're like trying to get him citizenship, you know, they're trying to get, but he's kind of up and coming, but he's really blown up since Kill Tony. He's been kind of a regular on Kill Tony.
Really?
So Kill Tony like really launches comedians into the spotlight and stuff. So
have you watched Mo Amir? He's got that show called Mo.
I haven't seen it.
There's a couple specials that he has. Mo is a great show.
Yeah.
He is funny. He was on The Daily Show recently.
I haven't seen him. I'm not that familiar with him. I don't think I've.
Palestinian dude. What about Ralph Barbosa? That guy.
I know who he is. I don't think I've seen him.
Like San Antonio, but he's blowing up.
Yeah, there's so many comedians. I mean, I love, again, it's like one of my favorite pastimes. I love going to see comedy shows.
Yeah.
So
I would like to try stand up at some point.
You should.
I think it'd be fun.
Well, I feel like it's not too far off of improv.
Yeah.
So
we're just finding the funny and stuff.
One time when I was in LA, like visiting friends in LA, this was several years ago now, but we went to the Comedy Store.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm. And Flo from Progressive.
Uh-huh.
I don't know her name. I just know her from Flo from Progressive.
Okay.
Do you know who I'm talking about? So
is that a car commercial? Insurance commercial?
She's like the Progressive
commercial for insurance.
Yeah,
okay.
She's like the Progressive. She's her name. She addresses herself as Flo. I'm not sure what her real name is.
Okay.
But she was at the Comedy Store doing improv when I was there. She was like one of the comedians on stage. So, you know, you see how a lot of these comedians have, you know, these personalities in TV and television and stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went to see comedy in New York when I was there to is it the Comedy Store? The Cellar.
Comedy Cellar.
Yeah, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. Okay, last game. We'll do Soundball. I'm trying to think if there's a comedy type of game. I can't think of one. Let's do Soundball. I'll pass you. The improv is about yes and.
Okay.
Life is about yes and.
Sure.
This community that I was a part of is called Best Friends and Belly Laughs. And one of our foundational beliefs or values was improv is a tool for self-help and self-improvement.
Yeah.
We would see people come in. I'm one of them that would come in nervous to contribute and quiet and kind of back.
Yeah.
And through repetition and practice and putting ourselves out there, you'd start to become more confident and more fun and more participatory and more alive.
Yeah.
People of all types would come in and almost learn public speaking and coming out of their shell.
I mean, I think it could be so helpful, right? It's like I've realized, I think something that I've noticed that's showed up for me a lot when I train, like even with jujitsu, with competitions, I would just freeze. So to be able to get on stage, which is so interesting because I did theater as a kid.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I was like, as a kid, I loved it. But there was some point when I hit, you know, my teenage years where it was, I don't know what happened. It was like I just like went into freeze.
Yeah.
So
we never do it on the theater, but I'd like to try it on a stage.
Yeah. So like I did plays and stuff when I was a kid at the local theater and I loved it. And I had the lead one time and it was a big deal. And I remember I was probably 10, But it was like, what happened? How can I get that back?
You can get it back.
Yeah.
It's there. It's that childlike fun and play when you
That's the thing.
shit's
right?
gotten too
It's just, like,
serious.
too serious. Yeah.
Yeah, adulting is
It is
serious.
serious in some ways, too serious.
It's really serious.
But that's the thing. If we think about attunement, if we can just get on that level with our kids and be silly and play,
and with other adults. It doesn't have to be
that's true.
drugs and alcohol. It can be some let's just goof around and find that attunement of silly and laughter and play to renew or reinvigorate that childlike passion and love and exploration and creativity, whatever it is.
I think we can develop, there's probably neuroplasticity through in that process.
We could get new neural pathways.
Yeah.
But improv is about yes and.
Okay.
Everybody says yes and.
Okay.
And it's good in life too. You accept the present moment. You take it in.
Okay.
You have to be, you almost tear down the world. The world doesn't exist. It only exists through what the two people there or however many people there that are doing it share. They create a world together.
Yeah.
And you say yes to the world that you create by what they say. It's almost like with every word, they're building it. Some ways to start improv is by doing scene work, where you'd say oh, I'm letting you know the landscape of where we are, whether I'm pretending to bowl or I'm pretending I'm in a coffee shop. You say yes and to that by saying, oh, I'm in a coffee shop. What would I do? What would be the opposite of what someone would do in a coffee shop? But I'm going to be in that space with you.
Okay.
I'm going to say yes to it.
Okay. All right.
And the way we did that with Convergence was you said oh, I'm hearing the word you're saying. I'm going to say yes to that word. And I'm going to do the and part is I'm going to add to it.
Right.
I'm going to either explore it with you by adding more detail, or I'm going to heighten it by creating silliness within it.
Okay.
So heightening or exploring are the two kind of things you can do. I'm sure there's a bunch of other things, but this one is a warm-up game, so it's got a focus. I send it to you. I send it by making a sound and a gesture. So I would be
okay.
And you would say yes to that by repeating that sound and that gesture. You would go,
okay. Okay. The same one.
Yep.
All right.
Exact same one.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let's go.
And now you'll send one back to me.
Okay.
Your own one.
Okay. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Bum, 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 bum.
Bum, 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 bum. Look, your neck goes back, and you're bracing for some.
I know. It's very intense.
Okay. Hoo-ah!
I didn't quite do that right. I just wanted to react to you.
You're fine. You did it perfectly. Your turn. Well, you don't do it at the same time. You could do it at the same time. I guess there's no wrong answer.
I think I just reacted to.
Oh, you did?
Expression.
Yeah, that was your reaction to my thing. You're like, oh my God. Okay, well now mirror it.
Okay.
Now you do it.
Well,
what I
don't
did.
Remember what you did.
You don't remember?
I don't know if I could remember it well enough to replicate it. Can you do it again?
Yeah. Whoa! Where's the passion? Where's the passion in that? You gotta really lean into that. Whoa! I want you to let all.
Oh my goodness.
Just whoa! Yeah, you tapped into it. Your fingers were shaking a little bit. Okay, your turn.
This is so silly.
Oh man, this is definitely
Okay.
silly.
What am I gonna do? That's pretty good. That was better than mine.
Couldn't be.
It could, yeah.
Couldn't be.
It was.
Okay.
Because then my tongue got tied.
Do 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 do.
Do 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 do. I don't think I got the tune right.
You did great. Let's not worry about right or wrong anymore.
Okay.
Let's just have fun passing it back and forth.
All
But
right.
you can think about right or wrong. There's no wrong. I think there's just
this is really challenging, some perfectionist tendencies.
Yeah.
This is not right.
yeah, you're like, this is not, you evaluate each one at the end of it. And it's like, nah, we can do that. Let's do that. Let's evaluate them. Let's lean into it
Okay. This
and
could be a
evaluate
good
each
exercise.
one. Okay, you send one to me.
Okay.
Okay.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Okay, that was pretty good.
How did you feel about that?
I feel like yours was more expressive than mine.
Where in this arm thing, or the way I was doing
facial?
Because I was doing my neck a little bit, maybe.
Maybe.
Well, try the way I did it then. Let's see.
Ooh,
I like it.
Your neck was like going in opposite directions.
I like what you did.
Very coordinated.
Yeah, I like. Oh, like I was coordinating my arm and my neck. Let me see. Darn it! I don't know that I could do it now.
No.
Woo.
Yeah, it's like
I lost it. My woo wasn't. I wasn't in the woo. Let me just hold on. Ooh.
That was intense.
That was good.
Okay. Ooh. Is that better?
That was good.
Okay.
You lost yourself in that.
I mean, that was fun.
Where were you?
Fun. I don't know.
That was
fun.
Big fun.
Okay. Yeah.
Big fun. Okay, I'll come up with one. Boing, 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 boing. This one,
okay.
You like balls bouncing, huh? You're like, that got you.
I think so. Okay. Boing, 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 boing. See, your vocal expression is way better.
Is it oing, 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 oing? Is that where it got you? It was the oing, oing, oing?
Yeah, this is like where I can't mimic people. You know, people who do impersonation.
Don't worry about mimicking me. Just throw yourself into the oing, oing, oing. You just be the ball, you know?
Okay.
No, 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 no.
No, 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 no.
No, 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 no. Oh, you were passing that to me, or you were mirroring it? No, 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 no. You know this is a Caddyshack reference. I don't know that he did that. Okay. Deep breath. You did so good. Oh my god. I think we need to be more silly.
We do.
More often.
I had last one.
Okay.
I think I'm just doing this for myself because I just need it right now.
Oh.
I think that was supposed to be an but it didn't come out right.
Can I tell you something about ums? I learned this thing about
like as in when you're feeling
an
space.
an
Okay. Yeah.
I learned it in some documentary about some Buddhists or some meditation folks. And has 4 parts to it.
Okay.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
What are the 4 parts?
I have no idea.
Okay, I'll tell you. I'm glad you didn't know because I wanted
to say them. I think I might have missed that in my yoga teacher training.
They didn't teach you about ohms?
No, I'm sure they did, but it was so many years ago. I don't remember.
It starts with an ah.
Ah. Okay.
And then it goes into a o.
Yes.
And then it goes into a
Makes sense.
Well, not like that, but
yeah.
And then you know what the 4th one is? Silence.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So
you want to do it
together?
Yeah, let's do it together. First, we're going to breathe in to chant. Well, let's just breathe in and breathe out. Not to chant, but just to tap into breath. Okay, now we'll breathe into chant. Are you ready?
Ready?
We're like zenned out now.
You're right. I love that. I love
Zen.
how it feels in your vocal cords.
I like, where it matches. Like sometimes it like resonates and it's like, oh, that's our ums are together. Our O's are together. Sometimes I don't think when I go to yoga classes and they do that, they don't lean into the ah part.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I'm like, why are y'all only doing the O part?
It's true.
I feel like I'm doing it right. And y'all aren't following. And that's an invitation for me to accept. I just need to accept
it, like
the present moment. Yeah. These folks
need to control the ah.
Yeah, I want the ah. Like a part of me wants to be like, no, guys, let's
correct this.
Let's correct this. Okay. Back there, did I hear? Let me hear your ah. Can I get a little you know? But I just have to live with everybody doing ohms differently.
Feels good. It feels nice to get that out.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it helped me get rid of my like nervous energy.
that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.